It was supposed to be just another shift, the kind you count down the minutes until it's over. The gas station where I worked sat on the outskirts of a small town, the last stop before the highway cut into miles of thick forest. Night shifts were usually slow. Occasional truckers, late-night travelers, and the occasional strung-out drifter looking for a cheap coffee. The station had been there for decades, with flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed in the quiet. There was a bathroom around the side of the building, but we always kept it locked after dark. It wasn't uncommon to find someone passed out in there. It started around 2 a.m. I was refilling the hot dog warmer when I saw movement in the reflection of the glass. A figure outside, just standing at the edge of the lot. I turned around, but they were gone. I shook it off. Could have been a trick of the light, or maybe just someone cutting through the trees. It wasn't uncommon, but then the phone rang. Gas and go, I answered. Silence. Hello? Breathing. Slow, deliberate. Someone was on the line, but they weren't speaking. I hung up and exhaled sharply, annoyed. Prank calls weren't new, but something about this one unsettled me. A few minutes later, the chime over the door rang. A man walked in, his steps slow, measured. He was tall and thin, his clothes a little too clean for someone stopping at a place like this. He didn't go to the shelves or the coolers. He just stood near the entrance, his face obscured by the shadow of his hood. I cleared my throat. Can I help you? He didn't respond. His head tilted slightly, as if he were studying me. I stared at him, waiting. The silence stretched until the air felt thick and wrong. Then he turned and walked back outside. I felt an eerie sensation crawl up my spine. A minute later, the phone rang again. Gas and go, I answered, my voice less certain this time. He likes you. The voice on the other end was distorted. A strange mix of static and something else. Something wet, like lips smacking too close to the receiver. I slammed the phone down. The man was still outside, standing just beyond the reach of the lights. I could barely make out his outline, just a dark figure blending into the blackness. The chime rang again. Another man walked in, this one younger, his hoodie pulled up. His hands were in his pockets, and he moved slowly through the aisles, picking up snacks, inspecting them, then setting them back down. Something about his movements felt rehearsed, as if he were going through the motions of a normal customer, but without the genuine curiosity of someone looking to buy something. Then the lights flickered. The buzzing of the fluorescents faltered for just a second, but in that second, I saw something. His face wasn't right. His eyes were too far apart. His mouth was too wide, the corners stretching just a little too much. The lights came back, and he looked normal again. He was grinning now, a slow, knowing grin. He walked up to the counter, set down a pack of gum, and slid a crumpled dollar bill toward me. Late night? His voice was smooth, almost too calm. I nodded stiffly. Yeah. His grin widened. Gotta stay awake. Wouldn't want to miss anything. I rang up the gum and pushed the change toward him, my fingers brushing against his. His skin was cold. The lights flickered again, and suddenly, he was gone. Not walked out, not turned away, just gone. I staggered backward, my breathing shallow. I looked outside. The first man was still there, but now, he wasn't alone. There were more of them, figures standing at the edge of the lot, just beyond the reach of the lights. Too many, too still. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 with shaking hands. The ringing felt like it went on forever. Then, 911, what's your emergency? I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Something was behind me. I could feel the weight of its presence. Slowly, I turned around. The young man was back, standing inches from me. His grin stretched wider than a human mouth should allow. We just wanted to say hello. Then the lights cut out completely, and I wasn't alone. Story 2. I took the job because I needed the money. That's how most bad decisions start, right? It was a simple gig, overnight security at a self-storage facility just outside of town. The kind of place people rented when they had too much junk or secrets they didn't want in their homes. The owner, an old guy named Ray, told me it was easy work. Just sit in the office, watch the cameras. If you see anything weird, call the cops. Otherwise, don't leave the office. Got it? Got it, I said, shaking his hand. I started the next night. The place was dead quiet, just rows and rows of metal storage units stretching out into the dark. There were only a few lights in the lot, making it impossible to see beyond the edges of the property. The office was a tiny shack with a desk, a coffee maker, and a wall of monitors showing grainy security footage. The first few hours were uneventful. I drank bad coffee, watched the screens, and scrolled through my phone. Then, just after 2 a.m., I saw movement. Unit 47. The metal roll-up door rattled, shaking like something inside was trying to get out. I leaned forward, staring at the screen. The door wasn't open, just shaking. I grabbed the radio and called Ray. Hey, I think we got an issue at Unit 47. Silence. Ray? Static crackled. Then his voice came through, low and tense. Stay in the office. I frowned. Shouldn't I check it out? Static. Then, stay in the office. The radio went dead. I stared at the screen. The door had stopped shaking. For a while, nothing happened. Then, at 2:37 a.m., the screen flickered. The camera feed jumped, distorted, like something was interfering with the signal. When it cleared, I felt my stomach drop. The door to Unit 47 was open. Not just open, peeled upward, like something had forced its way out. The hallway beyond the door was pitch black. I checked the other cameras, scanning the lot. Nothing. No movement. Just that open door, yawning like a mouth waiting to swallow something whole. I picked up the radio again. Ray, the door's open now. I think someone's here. Static. Then, don't look at it. What? More static. Then, in a voice that wasn't quite Ray's, stay inside. Do not look at it. A chill ran down my spine. I grabbed the flashlight and walked to the window. The lot was still empty. No cars. No signs of life. But something was wrong. The air felt thick, heavy, like the pressure had changed. I turned back to the monitors. That's when I saw him. A man stood just outside the open unit. Tall, unmoving. His back was to the camera, his body silhouetted against the dark. He was just standing there. I grabbed the radio again. Ray, there's someone here. A guy, just standing outside 47. The response was instant. Do not look at him. I swallowed. What the hell is going on, Ray? Silence. Then, turn off the monitors. I hesitated. What? Turn them off. Now. I looked back at the screen. The man was closer. He hadn't moved, at least, not on camera, but he was closer now, just outside the light's reach. My breath caught in my throat. I shut off the monitors. The office was plunged into darkness except for the dim glow from the streetlight outside. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. Then, tap, tap, tap. Something was knocking on the window. Slow, deliberate. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to breathe. Tap, tap. Long pause. Then, knock, knock, knock. I couldn't take it anymore. I flicked the monitors back on. The man was gone. The storage unit was closed. Everything was exactly as it had been before, except, on the screen closest to the office, there was writing on the door. 3 words, scrawled in something dark. You saw me. I quit the next day. Story 3. I hadn't spoken to my brother in years. Not because of a fight or any real bad blood. Just the kind of slow, inevitable drifting apart that happens when life pulls people in different directions. But then, out of the blue, I got a voicemail from him. It was short, frantic. Ethan, please. I need you to come to the house. Something's wrong. Just come. I replayed it 3 times, trying to decipher the tone in his voice. Fear? Desperation? It didn't sound like him at all. The house he was talking about was our childhood home, the one we grew up in before Mom and Dad died. No one had lived there in years, not since Nick left town. So why was he there now? And why did he sound like that? I drove the 4 hours back without thinking too much about it. I didn't call back. Something in my gut told me not to. By the time I pulled up to the house, the sun was already setting. The place looked exactly the same, frozen in time, covered in a thin film of neglect. Weeds choked the front walkway, and the porch light flickered weakly against the encroaching dark. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Nick? It's me. Nothing. The door was unlocked. The house smelled like dust and something else. Something damp, like what left to rot. Nick? I called out, stepping inside. Silence. The house still had most of our old furniture, like it had been waiting for us to come back. The floorboards groaned beneath my feet as I made my way to the living room. Then I saw him. Nick was sitting in Dad's old recliner, staring at the blank television screen. His face was pale, his eyes sunken. He didn't even flinch when I stepped into the room. Jesus, Nick, you okay? His head turned slowly toward me, his movements stiff, unnatural. His lips parted, but no words came out. I took a step closer. That's when I saw his hands. They were covered in scratches, deep, angry grooves running up his arms, as if he had been clawing at himself. What the hell happened to you? His mouth twitched. Then, in a hoarse whisper, he said, "It doesn't like when I leave." A chill ran through me. What doesn't? He slowly raised a shaking hand and pointed to the hallway, to our old bedroom. I followed his gaze. The door at the end of the hall was open just a crack, darkness spilling out into the dimly lit corridor. A deep, horrible sense of dread settled in my chest. Something about that door. Something wrong. I don't get it, I said. What are you talking about? Nick's breathing became shallow. It's in there. It's always been in there. I wanted to tell him he was being crazy, that this was just the house messing with him. But when I turned back toward the bedroom, the door was open wider. I hadn't seen it move. I swallowed hard. Nick, we need to go. He shook his head. It won't let me. I grabbed his arm, trying to pull him up. Come on, we're leaving. But then I heard it. A slow, creaking sound. The door to our old bedroom was opening. By itself. Nick started shaking. It knows you're here now. I turned back to him, panic rising in my throat. Nick, what the hell is going on? His eyes darted toward the bedroom, and then I saw it. A shape. Tall. Too tall. Hunched in the doorway. Its arms were long, fingers dragging against the floor. No eyes, no mouth. Just a smooth, pale face, tilted slightly as if studying me. Then it moved. Not walked. Moved. 1 second it was in the doorway. The next, it was closer. I stumbled back. Nick? But Nick wasn't in the chair anymore. The recliner was empty. I spun around, heart hammering. He was gone. I backed toward the door, my legs shaking. The thing in the doorway cocked its head, almost curious. I didn't wait to see what it wanted. I ran, out of the house, into my car. I didn't stop until I was miles down the highway. I tried calling Nick a dozen times. The calls never went through. When I went back the next day with the cops, the house was empty. No sign of Nick. No scratches on the chair. No open door at the end of the hall. But there was something else. The voicemail on my phone. The one from Nick. It was gone. Like he had never called me at all. Story 4. I've been a paramedic for 7 years. I've seen just about every horrific thing you can imagine. Car accidents, shootings, overdoses. You get used to it. Or at least, you think you do. Then there are calls that stick with you. The ones that don't make sense. This was one of them. It was a slow night when we got the call. A single car accident off Route 6, deep in the woods. The dispatcher's voice had an edge to it, like she wasn't telling us everything. We have a report of a vehicle off the road. No contact with the driver. Be advised, caller was unclear. That wasn't normal. When we pulled up to the scene, my partner, Dave, killed the sirens. The road was empty, pitch black, the surrounding woods swallowing the weak glow of our headlights. Then we saw the car. It was an old sedan, half buried in the trees, its front end crumpled against a thick oak. The driver's side door was wide open, but there was no one inside. Dave and I exchanged a look. Maybe they wandered off to get help, he suggested. I shined my flashlight into the trees. The ground was soft with leaves and rain, but there were no footprints, no sign of movement at all. Then the radio crackled. Unit 12, be advised, caller is on the line again. We waited. The dispatcher's voice came back, hesitant. They say they can see you. I turned, scanning the darkness. The road behind us was empty. The woods were silent. Dave's hand hovered near his belt. This is getting weird. I stepped toward the car. Hello? Nothing. I peered inside. The interior was clean. No blood, no signs of a struggle. But there was something strange. The keys were still in the ignition. The engine was running. I reached inside and turned it off. The silence that followed felt heavy. Then, from somewhere deep in the woods, a laugh. Not close, not far. Just wrong. It was a dry, rasping sound, like someone choking on their own amusement. Dave stiffened. Did you hear that? I nodded. My mouth was suddenly very dry. The radio crackled again. The dispatcher's voice was quiet. They say it's not him. I grabbed the mic. What do you mean? Static. They say the man who crashed the car never got out. I felt my stomach drop. Dave was already moving toward the trunk. We need to check this. He popped it open. The smell hit us first. Then the body. A man, mid-40s, his face twisted in a frozen scream. Blood dried against his shirt, his hands curled into fists. He'd been dead for hours. The radio crackled again. They say he's still out there. Dave slammed the trunk shut. We're leaving. I didn't argue. As we hurried back to the ambulance, I flicked my flashlight toward the trees one last time. And I saw it. A figure. Standing at the edge of the woods. Not moving. Not breathing. Just watching. The light hit its face. No, not a face. Just skin. Smooth. Blank. It tilted its head. And then, it grinned. I don't remember getting into the ambulance. I don't remember leaving. All I know is, when we got back to the station, Dave and I made a silent agreement. We never spoke about it again. Story 5. The house at the end of my street had been abandoned for years. It wasn't a wreck, just forgotten. Windows boarded up, weeds swallowing the front porch, the kind of place kids dared each other to touch before running away, giggling. No one ever stayed there for long. A few families tried, but they never lasted more than a few months. The for sale sign had become a permanent fixture in the overgrown lawn. So when the lights came on one night, I noticed. I was taking out the trash when I saw it, soft, yellow light glowing from the second-floor window. I froze. No one had lived there for almost a decade. The next morning, a moving truck was in the driveway. A man was standing on the porch, directing the movers. Tall, thin, dressed in all black. His skin was pale, stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. Something about him made my stomach twist. I told myself I was being ridiculous. People moved in and out of houses all the time. But that night, something woke me. At first, I didn't know why. I sat up, listening, my room bathed in the soft blue glow of my digital clock. Then I heard it. A tap. Soft, rhythmic, coming from my window. I turned, my pulse hammering in my throat. The house across the street was dark. But there, in the second-floor window, a figure, standing perfectly still, watching me. I couldn't make out details, just the silhouette against the dim glow of a single lamp. I shut my blinds and forced myself to sleep. The next day, I saw him, the new neighbor. He was outside, standing at the edge of his yard, staring at my house. No expression, no movement, just staring. I pretended not to see him. That night, the tapping came again. I didn't look this time. I just lay there, heart pounding, until it stopped. This went on for 3 nights. On the 4th night, I snapped. I yanked the blinds open. Nothing. The house was dark. The window empty. I exhaled, shaking my head. I was losing it. Then my phone buzzed. A text. From an unknown number. Don't look at me. I dropped the phone. A shadow moved in the window. I shut the blinds. That was the last time I looked. But I knew he was still there. Watching. Waiting. I barely slept for weeks. Then one night, my phone buzzed again. Another text. You're safe now. The next morning, the house was empty again. No lights. No furniture. No trace that anyone had ever lived there. I never saw him leave. The for sale sign was back, swaying in the wind.